Hello, Mavericks. How's it going? Put your feet up on the chair, put your feet up on the desk, put your feet up wherever you are, because we're going to jump into that brain of yours. I tell people all the time, I have not read a book on technical analysis and trading in well over a decade. And the reason is that I started to recognize that while you do need to know how to read a chart, it is not the actual important thing in trading. And then I got into okay, what is the important thing? It's position management. It's you're going to make a whole bunch of decisions. Some are going to be good. Some are going to be bad. Can you get a positive risk return out of that? Can you admit when you're wrong early enough, take the loss, and hold when you're right long enough to actually make that difference? And that had nothing to do with the charts. That had everything to do with who we are as people. And so I took a deep dive into, all right, what is this all about? And I'm not the only one. And I actually wanted to start this session off with a few books because there's a fairly new scientific discipline called behavioral economics. Behavioral economics is basically the study of why people do things. Now, I really got introduced to this by a book called Freakonomics. It was unlike any book I had ever read. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And I started to find out there's lots of studies going on about why human beings do the things we do. And specifically, there's actually been quite a few studies on why people do the things that they do in investing and trading and when they are taking risk. These books are two of my favorites, The Behavioral Investor and The Hour Between Dog and Wolf. I highly recommend these books. And the thing I like about them is I'm a science guy. I want the science. I want somebody to be like, hey, this is why we do it, and here's the science behind it. And that's what I like about these books is they talk about the science behind it. Because we all know that we have emotions, that we're human. We all know that. But to get down into the science of what actually happens, and I do want to highlight The Hour Between Dog and Wolf, because John Coates, he was a professional trader, worked on a hedge fund desk, I believe, and he literally, I don't know if he fully retired from that, but he went to medical school to get his neurology degree so he could understand what is actually happening, because he saw on the trading floor, some people reacted well, some people didn't. So let's jump into what actually happens in your brain. Now, we all have 5 senses. And so everything that we see or hear is going to have some sort of impact. Okay, support is breaking. The market's making new highs. And the MACD is crossed. CNBC says to sell. Fed raising rates. So all of these are what are called inputs. These are all stimulus. Now, they all come into our ears. We all see the things on the screen. What actually happens inside the brain? Now, there is a well-documented brain process, and it's TFA. Thoughts lead to feelings, feelings lead to actions. This is how the brain processes all that information. And so it gets all that stimulus into your senses, and then it basically breaks down that stimulus and says, okay, what are these thoughts? What do they mean? And the brain is going to try to figure out the best course of action. It's always searching for information, always searching for danger or risk. That is how we were built as human beings, to really make life and death decisions based on the senses and the input that we take in. So we have all these thoughts come into all these input come into our brain, and it creates these thoughts. Now, the next thing that happens is the body will take those thoughts and release a chemical in your body that's going to urge you and prompt you, and I even want to use the term force you to make a certain decision. Have you ever been in a situation where, I'm just going to tell a dumb story. This is the only thing that popped into my mind. I remember I was over at my friend's house when I was young, probably 17, 18, downstairs in the basement listening to cool Pink Floyd music, and I got this overwhelming feeling of discomfort. And it said, just get out of here. And I thought to myself, I am not Gonna get scared by some ghost, if ghosts even exist. That is the dumbest thing in the world. No one ever died from a ghost. So I sat there, and the feeling got more and more intense. And finally, I got up. And I ran upstairs. It was so uncomfortable. And that was my body shooting hormones and chemicals through my body that made it unbearable for me to actually stay there. Even though I was fully rational, fully like, this is the dumbest thing. If there is a ghost, it's cool. I want to meet a ghost. I want to see it. And it just forced me to act. This is the process that the body goes through. Then those feelings provoke you to action. And then whatever happens at the end of that will either add to or take away from your programming. So we're going to talk about programming in a different psychology lab. I highly recommend you look into the programming video. We talk about what happens in your brain, because let's say that you were in a situation, you had some risk, the danger was fight or flee, and you fled. And because you fled, it caused someone that you love and care about to be injured. The next time that you are in that same situation, your brain wrote a program that says, we're not going to run this time. You already predetermined what you're going to do the next time that happens. And that is coded in your brain. And so the next time it happens, you have already made the decision, and your thoughts are going to say, I already made this decision, so I'm going to fight this time. Your body sends you adrenaline, all the stuff it needs to get in a fight. This is how the brain works. So to really understand it, we really have to, again, take a deep dive into those feelings, because the feelings are simply a result of the thoughts. So we talked about programming, more on programming in another video. But again, your programs are things like, I've already predetermined how I'm going to do it. Now, I don't want to get too far into pseudoscience, because it's actually not all that much pseudoscience. But there's something that's being hotly debated, is the illusion of free will. And scientists have shown that it actually takes about 3 to 4 seconds for the prefrontal cortex to spool up enough brain power to actually make a rational, reasonable decision. And then they've shown that most decisions are made well before that. So the question is, how are those decisions getting made? And the theory is that our brain has actually written programs that have already determined, okay, if I get this stimulus that the stove is hot, I already know what I'm going to do. So there doesn't need to be thought. So the brain makes all of these programs, and it's just waiting for the stimuli to hit. And it's like, we got a program for this. We already know what we're going to do. So your programming is your personality. It's what happened in your last trades. It's your goals. What are you trying to accomplish? All of that is your programming. And we'll talk about that in another session. Stimulus is just everything. It's literally everything that comes into your brain. And then that's going to create a chemical reaction. So understand, is simply a chemical reaction, and it's hormones. So these are some of the major types of hormones that people know and talk about. Dopamine is the reward chemical of the brain. Basically, when you succeed, you get dopamine, and it's awesome, and you want more of it, and you want even bigger doses of it. You get adrenaline. I remember the very first time I bought a stock. I remember sitting there, it was Sienna was the stock. And I was like, should I buy? Should I not? And finally, my hand trembling, I reached over to the mouse button and I clicked buy. And at that point, my heart was pounding. I had this feeling of adrenaline. And I think I sold it for a couple hours later for like a $10 gain. And I was wiped out. I had to go home and take a nap. Like, oh, this is exhausting. These are the things that happen. Cortisol, this is the stress hormone. When you feel stress, your body releases cortisol. And the cortisol, what it does is it enhances the glucose usage in the brain, just like adrenaline would do. But it also curbs functions that would be harmful in a fight or flight scenario. So it actually will shut off some of the things that you may want to use or think about it may actually say, hey, you don't even get to decide this because cortisol is going to block that all the way. So as you can see, we have all of these hormones running through us based on our programming and our thoughts. I want to go through just 2 studies here. And these are one is from Behavioral Investor, and this is the one. This is a paper written in 2011, Extraneous Factors in Judicial Decisions. Now, when I read this, I just got so depressed and sad because what it was, it analyzed the prison parole system. And they followed 8 judges, and these judges had at least 10 years of experience. And they followed these judges to see how they ruled on parole cases. And they took a look at 3 time periods: the first part of the day, the part before lunch, and the part after lunch. At the beginning of the first session, a prisoner had a 65% chance of being paroled. That declined to almost 0 before the lunch break. Then after lunch, the number popped up to 65%. This was heartbreaking. Can you imagine having to spend a couple more years in jail because the judge was hungry? That to me was just like, oh my gosh, this is just so crappy that just based on where you got in the schedule, your next 3 to 5 or 10 years or whatever it was determined by the stomach. But this is what happens. And there's other studies that have shown this as well. When you are in hunger, you don't make rational decisions. You don't do a lot of things. So this is just an example of just the hormones swirling in your body. If it can make a very experienced judge, if just being hungry can create the TFA, thoughts, feelings, actions, like, well, this person doesn't justify getting out because of how I feel, and they make that ruling, again, it's heartbreaking when you think about things like this. And here's another study. This is sleep and academic performance among student pharmacists. If you want to take a look at this study, just type that in and you'll get this study. But basically, it followed pharmacy students. Now, the pharmacy exams are very, very tough. And this is a very, very tough profession to join. They basically followed the students, and they found out that 54% of the students obtained less than 7 hours of sleep on a daily basis, and 81% of students obtained less than 7 hours of sleep before the exam. They looked at both exam scores, they looked at both regular GPA scores, and they found that the people that got the better sleep had the higher rates. Now look, I know what you're thinking, because I thought it too, of course, the people that are diligent, they're going to stay at home and study. The people that aren't, they're going to go out and party in college. Okay, it's possible. But there's many other studies that show that when we are sleep deprived, especially sleep deprived, we don't have adequate functions of our cognitive abilities. It is actually lower because of it. So these are just, again, 2 things. I talked about hunger and I talked about sleep. So hopefully I brought you to the point where you are saying, oh no, I'm screwed. And guess what? You are. I am. Everyone is. This is the reality of what we're dealing with. So let's now talk about, okay, what can we do? And that's really the entire purpose of our psychology lab at Maverick, is to basically walk you through what can you do to break this cycle, this TFA, or how can you make TFA very positive for you instead of fighting against it. So let's talk about the things that you can do. First off, reduce stimulus. If you simply reduce your stimulus, if you simply cut back on the amount of time you stay behind your system, watching the market, you cut back on the amount of media that you consume, you cut back on, CNBC watches and, other things that you're doing, you by default will cut down on the feelings that you feel, because you can't have a feeling without the stimulus. This one was a tough one for me because I love I love media. I love reading about stuff. I love knowing about what's going on. But it definitely will affect you. And just to give you one little personal thing here, this is in spring of 2022. And right now there's a war going on between Russia and Ukraine. And I was following it very, very closely. And I felt like crap. I was depressed. I was absolutely, totally, and utterly depressed to see what was actually going on over there. And I realized it was affecting me, it's affecting, my relationships with people, it was affecting my work ethic. And I realized I got to cut back on what I'm watching because this is not going to do any good for me. And so I did. Another story is when I was trading the U.S. payrolls report in our currency division. I remember years ago, I was up in Canada and I always would have CNBC on and they would be the first one to tell you what the number was, and then I can make a trade off the number. Well, in Canada, they didn't have CNBC, so I didn't have anything on. I had to literally just watch the price action. I ended up making a good trade, made some good money, and I realized like hours and hours later, I don't even know what the numbers were. From that point on, I realized having that stimulus was negative for me in that situation. So for the next couple of years, I would actually turn the TV off before a news announcement came out because I didn't want that stimulus. I didn't want it there. What else can we do? Daily rituals. All right. Now this can be really anything you like. We talk about, what it takes to be a trader. What are the steps that we have to do? Basically, we want you to be ready to trade. When you actually sit down to do your research, to find your setups, to build your trades, we want you to be in the right frame of mind. So we talked about hunger, we talked about sleep, we talked about programming, all these things. Daily rituals really help us out as human beings. One of the big ones that I've read that many traders do is meditation. Now, I've tried meditation myself. I've been unsuccessful at meditation. But I have a daily ritual before I sit down behind my system. I go through certain things to get ready for the day, get myself emotionally ready to where I feel like I'm centered and my programming is correct. So think about what you can do in your life. Think about what you want to do in your life to create this ritual, because the more ritual we can create, the more comfortable it is and the more automatic it is. So, they always say it takes 21 days to break a habit or to make a new habit. And a habit is literally a program in your brain. So again, a habit. So if you can create this program in your brain where, okay, I wake up, I meditate, I get my coffee, I spend 5 minutes reading this book, whatever it is. So when I do start to trade, I'm going to feel calm, peaceful, ready to go, and energetic. You do that for a month, all of a sudden, you no longer have to even think about, am I ready to trade? Because you've already done the rituals. You've already done the rituals to where you are there. Then the last one, the correct programming. Again, I'm going to push you off to the other video we have about programming. This is everything. So I talked earlier about TFA. Thoughts lead to feelings, feelings lead to action. Well, there's a gentleman named T. Harvecker. He says, no, that's not right. It's PTFA. Programming leads to thought. Thought leads to feelings, feelings lead to action. And I entirely agree 100% with him. Because again, we've written these programs in our mind. We've written these habits, bad habits, good habits. We've written them. And if we don't change those programs, then we're going to really struggle at this. So correct programming, and I'm just going to really wrap up that video in just one little sentence here. If your goal is, I want to make money, you're in trouble. If your goal is, I want to be able to quit my job, you're in trouble. If your goal is, oh my gosh, I want to have a good retirement, you're in trouble, because all of those programs come with lots and lots of flaws. lots of things that are going to cause you to make bad decisions. Correct programming is, I want to follow my system as closely as possible. That is the correct programming of a trader. Not that you want to make money every week, not that you want to do this or this. It's that you want to be able to follow your system to the T. That is success. And if you put yourself in that situation, all of a sudden, trading isn't as hard. It's still difficult, but it's not as hard because you're not trying to make money. You're not trying to avoid losses. Your criteria is, I need to be flawless on my execution of my trading system. That is going to set you up really nicely. So like I said, we are going to be pushing you off to that programming video, but until you understand your programming, you have no chance to change your behavior. I tried to be more disciplined. I tried to, hey, just don't be an extrovert. Just don't need constant stimulus. It's so easy, right? No, I couldn't do it. I had to figure out, okay, who am I? How do I work? And how can I actually trade in spite of this? How can I succeed in spite of this? And that to me is the real key to being a professional and winning at this game. So understand most of your actions you take are going to be predetermined by that programming. Once you get stimulus that comes into your mind, your brain says, okay, we already have a program for this. We're going to run this program and it's going to release the chemicals in your body. Now those chemicals are going to, I put here, encourage you to act. If they're intense enough, they're going to force you to act. You literally have no choice because you are being forced by these chemicals. So be aware. Be aware of the war we're fighting inside. And if you're aware of it, you have a much better opportunity and chance to overcome it. Because if you're not aware of all these things happening, you think that you're making decisions and you can't seem to make the right decision ever. It's because you're being pushed around by your hormones. So start each trading session with your routine, whatever it is. Keep yourself centered, get it to where your goals are to follow your trading system as closely as possible. Period. That's your goal. And remember, thoughts lead to feelings, feelings lead to actions. If you want to change your actions, change your thoughts. Different thoughts will have different feelings, and they're going to lead you to the action you want. And be able to change your thoughts, you got to change your programming, which we'll get into in a different video. All right, thank you so much for joining me. I hope this helps you out. It's really just an explanation of what happens in your brain. It's not really what to do about it. We'll get into that in other videos, but this is a guarantee. This is all swirling around inside your body, even at this moment. Hearing my voice saying things to you, it's creating those chemicals. Thank you so much for joining me. We'll see you in other sessions. Goodbye, everybody.